Our last keynote speaker of the day is Mr. Friedrich Martens. Mr. Martens was appointed by the International Olympic Committee in 2013 to head the newly created Integrity Betting Intelligence System to help safeguard sports events from match manipulation connected to sports betting. IBIS has taken a pragmatic approach, bringing together law enforcement entities and the Olympic movement. In early 2017, Friedrich was asked to lead the Olympic movement unit on the prevention of the manipulation of competitions, strengthening and streamlining all IOC initiatives, including IBIS, and further engaging international federations, national Olympic committees, athletes, and their entourages. Join me in welcoming Friedrich Martens. Friedrich, please. Yes. Pleasure.
Hello, everybody. Just have to work out how the clicker works. So first of all, I want to say thank you to Mr. Monaco. I haven't met you yet, but thanks for hosting us here in Buenos Aires. And then also thanks to WLA, to Jean-Luc, the president, and his team for including us in presenting here at the World Lottery Summit. So compared to the presentation you just heard, this is a bit more institutional, but I will try to make it as hands-on as possible and to also link it to the world of lotteries, how we are cooperating and what has happened in the past and what will happen in the future. So just a short view on the agenda, how I plan to move along in this presentation. First, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the IOC, who we are, what we do. I hope most of you know what we are doing. I just heard from back there that somebody mentioned that the Olympics were here in Buenos Aires. We had a couple of weeks ago only the Youth Olympic Games in Buenos Aires, and I want to show you what we did in this fantastic city and how it worked. Because from our side, the Youth Olympics here in Buenos Aires were the South American Olympics, how we envisaged it 2 years earlier, just not too far from here in Rio de Janeiro, and it was a fantastic event from all different angles. Then I'm going to talk to you about this rather long name, Olympic Movement Unit, on the prevention of the manipulation of competitions, and I will tell you why it is as long. And this is also a bit my baby and my personal topic. So I want to concentrate on that. Last part, as I said before, I will try to give you some very practical insight of what we are doing during our main events. So let's start. First of all, who are we? We are the IOC, so I'm talking about the Olympic movement. What is the Olympic movement? I'm not gonna ask the question in the room, but people have different views of what the Olympic movement is. So this is very complicated, but I want to just focus your view on two things. So of course, IOC, that's the entity, International Olympic Committee. You will see how we are made up of, the stakeholders, but what is the essence is that we organize the Olympic Games. And the athletes are at the core of what we are doing. And this will then link back to why we're doing what we are doing. You will see that. Next slide is actually a bit more complicated, but some hinging point for you guys, because you see in the middle the IOC, then you see members, administration, so that's where I am. But outside, next circle, you see NOC, National Olympic Committees. Most of National Olympic Committees get large part of their contribution, of their yearly budget, from you guys, from lotteries, from national lotteries. In Switzerland, where the IOC is based, Jean-Luc, I think it's more than 80%, that 75%, that Swiss Olympic, the body who is sending the athletes to our event, to the Olympic Games, 75% of that money comes from Swiss lotteries. Then you also see, sorry for the acronyms on this slide, but if you look at the acronym saying YOCOC and BID cities, that stands for Organizing Committee of the Olympic Games, or Youth Organizing Committee of the Olympic Games, right? These Olympic Games, like upcoming Tokyo 2020, large amount of the money of their budget is coming from national lotteries. So this is why this is so important to present to you where we are coming from, and that I know the faces and I see who those guys behind the national lotteries are. And I will show you how this is linking back to my project specifically. So, IOC, unique position. We can influence all these stakeholders in the Olympic movement. So we are talking about, next one, we are talking about NOCs, just mentioned it, 206 national Olympic committees all around the world. Then I'm talking about international federations. So if I say IFs, that's what that stands for, international federations. You have the summer ones, Olympic ones, 28. You have the winter ones, 7. And these are all the sports that you guys have in mind when you talk about sports, all the big sports. Now, I want to slightly be more specific what I am doing, the unit for the prevention of competition manipulation. And I will start it very hands-on with a very short video, just showing you what we show the athletes, what we are doing, what they have to be aware of, which is match fixing.
Cheating in sport. Doping. Violent conduct. But what about losing on purpose to win money on a bet? Or to face an easier opponent in the next round? This is called competition manipulation, or match fixing. It kills the competition, the excitement, the drama. It kills the motivation for clean athletes and fans. It kills the spirit of sport. Disrespecting your team. Disrespecting your opponents. Disrespecting your fans. You can make a difference. Don't bet on your sport. Don't fix, always do your best. Don't share inside information, and always report.
So this is what we show athletes, coaches, referees. They don't have to know who we are, who the IOC is. So even if we talk to athletes, like we were 3 people from my team in Buenos Aires some weeks ago, and we had, as you will see, thousands of interactions. They don't have to know what the IOC is, what NOC stands for. They probably know it because they compete in sports, but what they have to know is what is at stake for me. What do I have to do if somebody comes up to me and gives me money for throwing a match or a competition? You always have to keep in mind that football, it is a part of the Olympic movement, but football is not what we are talking about. We're talking about 34 different sports, right? So the word match fixing in itself is not the word that we use, and therefore the long name, manipulation of competitions. Because if you talk about archery, if you talk about luge, a couple of you might not even know what luge is, right? So we're talking about competition manipulation. So What's the connection to reality, to real life? Why we, the IOC, decided to have such a unit? There is sports betting on the Olympics. You see estimations for the global market size, that's the turnover. So that is money. Some of you, having expertise in sports betting, know that these numbers are not the same in other sports. I will show you how that compares. But we had in Rio estimated, talking to different entities outside, to lotteries, to private sports betting organizations, to regulating organizers, to some entities who have knowledge in that realm. We had about 6 to 10 billion euros. So that is money. Winter Olympics, half to 1 billion euros. The top sports, in air quotes, top sports, I want to catch your glimpse on one number, and this number is in Rio, football, 40%. So just about half, a bit less than half, was on football. Again, those in the room who have expertise on sports betting know that in sports betting terms, football is by far the biggest, right? So sometimes we talk to betting operators outside and they tell us 70, 80% is still being bet on football. I worked for a private betting company in Austria and we had 95% on football, right? At the Olympics, it's different. Not even half is on football. And these are Olympic Games in Brazil, where football is the sport. So it's even more interesting that during those core 2-3 weeks of the Olympics, there is betting on any event, on any sport, on any discipline, even on those sports that I just said, archery, or you can take shooting or other smaller ones. Same for the winter ice hockey, 35%. That does not seem a lot if you compare it to the numbers of sports betting operators who tell you that ice hockey is the only sport that sports betting on winter sport happens, not at the Olympics. So the money might not be huge if you talk to sports betting experts, but I think even 1 billion or 10 billion is huge. And for the athletes, the only thing they have to know is that betting is happening and you're not supposed to be betting on your own event. I will tell you specifically more in detail how that works for Olympic athletes. So, yeah, easy to say, and that doesn't surprise anybody in the room. There's a large increase happening on sports betting also on the Olympics. Since we track it, since Torino 2006, it's going up. The numbers are just climbing immensely. Like I said before, compared to other major sporting events, just an example, also estimated numbers. FIFA World Cup just happened in Russia. We had about 5 times. That's very conservative. I would say the numbers are even higher than that. If you take Wimbledon, for example, Grand Slam, just 2 weeks, I think, or 2 weeks also in May, June, we had 10 billion. Estimated, conservative. So let me go back, because in the presentation before, I heard it from back there, it was mentioned that somebody talked about a sailor who went to the Olympics, right? So I want to ask in the room, and I know that sometimes it's like, okay, I'm not going to raise my arm, I'm not going to ask a question, but who here knows of any cases of match fixing, of competition manipulation at the Olympics? And please, if you do so, show me, because that helps me also in going back to Lausanne and talking about that we have to be even more proactive. So I'm asking the question right now. Who has heard? 1, 2, 3, 4. Very little people. So I'm just gonna tell you, just gonna open all of them. In Beijing, even back 10 years, we had a case, and this is the connection to, I think I heard it correctly, sailing before. I hope it was not a sailor from Ireland who was mentioned there. Okay, that's fine. Because we caught a guy who was betting on his own competition with the inside information using his knowledge that he had. In London, I was hoping that more of you would raise the arm because that case is very commonly known. In badminton, we had a case of sporting manipulation, which happened at the London Olympics. We checked, and there was no connection to sports betting. So at least these athletes did not breach the code against match fixing at the Olympics. In Rio, just 2 years ago, we had altogether 3 athletes in boxing. You see one of them here. I think he became world champion some weeks ago. His name is Conlon from Ireland, Michael Conlon. And one of these athletes did bet against himself in his own bout, in his own fight. So this is a massive breach of integrity rules at the Olympic Games. In Pyeongchang, we had a case in cross-country skiing. Who would have thought, right? Now, my unit, the unit, Olympic Movement Unit, against competition manipulation, to say it more shortly. We created this last year, early 2017, at a forum where also Mr. Monet Banet was there. And the main point, let me just go to the next slide, is that one. Streamlining the IOC's initiatives via the unit in order to better engage the stakeholders that I showed before, NOCs, IFs, right? Just for you to know, this is very institutional, and I think I can mention it for 5 seconds, but only for you to know, we are based in the Ethics and Compliance Office. This office is having oversight over the Ethics Commission and also over compliance cases within the IOC. So this is where the unit sits, and only to make it all logical, the whole circle, we have an advisory board. It meets twice a year, and we have members from all stakeholders. So from the winter IFs, from the summer IFs, from the National Olympic Committees, from the IOC membership, and from the athletes, which is the most important group. So what are we doing? We call it the 3-pillar strategy. Pillar A is called regulations and legislation. I will show you in detail what that means. Pillar C is the intelligence and investigation, and this is also a nice link where I can link it to the lotteries and the GLMS system. And Pillar B is the most important one. It's prevention, it's education, it's awareness raising. And I will show you examples for all of those. So first one, regulation and legislation. Just for you to know, our stakeholders, as I said, and I bring it back to the stakeholder approach because I think that's the most valid and most important approach that we all can have, also you guys on your national lotteries. So we have specific articles against the manipulation of competitions since 2006. Since 2015, we have something called the Olympic Movement Code on the prevention of competition manipulation. What this code is, it has specific violations, easy to understand for athletes, for coaches, for referees, for everybody who is at the Olympic Games. I will show you later how I define that. It's called in Olympic speech accredited person, so everybody who has a pass for the Olympic Games has to sign something. I will show you. Violations for athletes are prohibition of betting, So a very flat-out prohibition of betting, because that's the easiest way to make sure to tell them you're not allowed to bet, so do your best not to go onto any sites or not go into any shops, because that's a breach of the code. Second one is manipulation of competitions, match fixing, very obvious. Third one is use of inside information. And the fourth one is, even if you are not betting and you wouldn't think about betting at the Olympic Games, if you have knowledge that somebody aims to bet at the Olympic Games, you have to report it. We have a mechanism, very easy. They know about it, they get education about this hotline, this reporting mechanism. We have it online, we have it over phone, we have it over email directly. So these are all processes in place. And the aims of this code, as I said before, it's to harmonize the stakeholders that we can touch. We are not talking about governments, law enforcement, lotteries, private bookmakers, right? We try to work together with all those stakeholders, but our core stakeholders are international sports federations and NOCs. So our aim with this code is to harmonize the rules, give them harmonized definitions. These are always implemented at the Olympic Games. And since last year, and this is a major step for us, these are implemented in the Olympic Charter, and this means that it is mandatory for all these sporting organizations to implement the code. Otherwise, we could, very hands-on, we could kick them out of the Olympic Games. Similarity to doping, all of these international federations, NOCs, had to implement the World Anti-Doping Code in 2000. I think it started in 2003. So it's the same mechanism. We put it in the charter, and our event, Olympic Games, you have to be compliant to it, otherwise you face serious consequences. This one, again, very institutional, so let me just fly over, just for you to get a glimpse. What we are also doing, we are working together with intergovernmental organizations like Interpol, like we travel around the world. Just some weeks ago to Malaysia, then last week to Germany to talk to the NOCs and to the international sporting bodies who are there. In Malaysia, you have the Badminton World Federation, for example, so this is a reason why we went there. And we talked to them about the issue, about the topic. We work together also with the Council of Europe. Some of you in the room hopefully know about the Macolon Convention. So this is what we are doing with the code, but on the other side, it's for governments. These we cannot touch, and we don't want to touch them, but we help the Council of Europe to implement the Macolon Convention, which is the only international convention who is talking about match fixing to make it criminal in many countries, and this is happening. In Switzerland, for example, it will be on the 1st January next year that we will be compliant, or that Switzerland will be compliant with said convention. Then we also have a partnership with the United Nations Office of Drug and Crimes. So we work together with them on a program specifically dealing with whistleblowing. What do we do with whistleblowers? How do we protect them? Because some of you might know this is how the big doping scandal with the Russian doping story happened, and this cannot happen again. Just on match fixing, it should not. So we are working with UNODC, making sure that we discuss this. And of course, as we sit in Europe, we work together with the EU Commission on several working groups. Now, awareness raising and capacity building. As I said before, I think that's the most important of the three pillars. I always say in meetings. It's 80–90% of what we are focused on within the unit. So more than half of my team is working on exactly that. How do we do it? Since last year, we have a new awareness-raising campaign, and we have a code of conducts, which is something I've talked to a good friend who's working for GLMS, and this is also an idea that a code of conduct would be a good idea on many, many other issues also for members of GLMS. So we did that for our key stakeholders, the athletes, the accredited persons at the Olympics, on the lines of what you said, what you saw before, what they are not supposed to be doing, betting, manipulation, using inside information, and they have to report, right? But we also have animations, we have e-learnings, and for those international sports federations who are not yet in the digital age, because you might be surprised some are not there yet, we also have flyers, we also have goodies that they can give out in eye-to-eye, in person-to-person workshops. So you see some examples here. Most important, in the right top corner, you see Be True, Be You, Believe in Sport. That's the name of the campaign. Sounds very general, very unspecific. Reason is very easy. We are the IOC. We don't have one sport, right? So we have to be very specific. What we offer to the IFs, and I will show you an example, they can take this campaign and all the contents, and they can copy and paste them. They can take out the Olympic rings, they can take out the Believe in Sport, and they can do whatever they want. So we have the first IFs who are doing that. That's the FEI, that's the Equestrian Federation, the Horse Riding Federation. But we also have the Badminton Federation. They use Believe in Badminton. Table Tennis Federation, who just can take this content. They don't have to have resources. They don't have to spend money. We help them. And it's very easy, a very quick win, how to do that. I think the next one is one example video on the third breach of the code. So you're not supposed to be giving away inside information. I'm just gonna let you watch that. This is how we communicate with athletes. So again, this is hands-on. It's a 10-second video. We have, all in all, I think 15 different videos, and each federation or sporting organization can decide which ones to use and how to use them. Easily embeddable in social media, easily showable at workshops. This is how we do it. Another example, I mentioned e-learning. So the e-learning is, I think, a very important tool. We used it in Pyeongchang. So just to give you, before I give you some stats, to give you an idea of how that worked, it was not mandatory. So our dream is to make it mandatory. But to be honest, at the Summer Olympics, I could not tell Roger Federer, for example, you have to run through that, and if you don't, you're not allowed to compete at the Olympics, right? Then I would have problems with the IOC president, I guess. So our dream is to make it mandatory, but it is not. The athletes log into the Athlete 365 portal, which is the IOC's main portal to communicate with athletes globally, talking about anti-doping, talking about athletes' career program, like what do you do after your career, but also about this topic, competition manipulation. So in Pyeongchang, we used the IFs to push that down. And this is what happened. We had 625 participants who did it and who successfully got the certificate, which is about 1/4 of athletes. We had 27 countries, actually a bit more, which is more than half at the Winter Olympics. We had all sports in the e-learning, and most importantly, we had, as you saw before, ice hockey as the most relevant sport and curling as the most risky sport also. 80% of all ice hockey players, referees, coaches, physios, took the test, and some teams, we reached 100%. So even if it's not mandatory, that means that those players know about the issue now. So they know what to do, where to report to. And this was the first time we used that in Pyeongchang. Now, Youth Olympic Games, told you before, just happened a few weeks ago, so some images here. Was a fantastic event. Very happy with it. I think both sides, the country and the IOC. Opening ceremony, for example, was not like in a stadium only built for the opening ceremony and then never used again, but it was happening on the biggest road, the Avenida, forgot the name, but I think some date, some date behind it. 250,000 people were there. And these Youth Olympic Games were really embraced by the country, by the city. So what did we do here? I told you before, 3 people of my team were there. We had a booth in the village, and this is also kind of intelligently located in the village because this tent about all these topics, anti-doping, prevention of match fixing, athletes' career program, harassment and abuse, which is a big topic right now, is set right before you enter the dining hall. So they have to go there. They have to pass by. And then we use some kind of incentives to make them run through our initiatives. They could get goodies and stuff. So we had thousands and thousands of interactions with all of the participants at the Youth Olympics. Then we had a smartphone app. You know, it's not only kids now. Used to say, you know the kids now, but everybody of us, smartphone app, right? So they get actually a smartphone when they come to the Youth Olympics or to the Olympics, and there we have our app on the first screen you see. And we also worked together with some IFs and National Olympic Committees and had workshops just like that right now, talking to officials or athletes. The last pillar, and this is what was the initial start of the unit idea, of the idea that here we at the IOC have to deal with that issue. In 2012-13, we created something called the Integrity Betting Intelligence System. So this system, as you see in the diagrams below, is a catalyst between the different stakeholders. On the one side, you have sports betting. You will see later, sports betting, I'm not only talking about the lotteries, I'm also talking about different issues. And on the other side, you have the sport. You have international federations. And all stakeholders had to create something called the single point of contact, which means that now, 4 years later, in every sporting organization, there is somebody who is not an expert, I wouldn't say, but very close to being an expert on sports betting. So the Olympic movement partners, OCOGs, upcoming Olympic Games, Tokyo, Beijing, LA, and Paris, we are working already with all of them. On the other side, the Youth Olympics, next one's in Lausanne. So easier to travel there from Lausanne. And below, as I said before, summer, winter, and in Tokyo, we will have 5 new sports. If any of you is interested, please come up and talk to me. Very interesting sports that's going to be added at the Olympic program. Now, the non-Olympic movement partners are, on the one side, private entities, I would say, because it's not only operators. I think I saw Yoni in the room before, so Kambi is on there. We also have entities who deal with the integrity of sports, like Sportradar, Perform, Bad Genius, but you will see all the logos of all the big sports betting operators are on there. Then, public operators. I will not dwell on this because this is what's happening here. It's the World Lottery Association, it's national lotteries, and it's GLMS. So I think in the afternoon we will have a session, a panel session, and there I will be joined by Ludovico, president of GLMS, and also by Younes El Mekrafi, I think, will join us also from the Moroccan national lotteries. Then, as I said before, regulators, also a big piece of the puzzle. You know, Malta regulator, Malta 12% or 12 point something percent of the GDP is coming through sports betting, right? So they are an impressively important picture in this puzzle. And last but not least, we have partners within the law enforcement, not only Interpol, like I said, but also Europol, also the FBI, and because we are in Switzerland, the Swiss FedPol agency in Bern. Now, last example, just to give you one final food for thought. In Pyeongchang, so how does that work? On a sustainable scale. First, we have to make the rules very clear, which I told you, we did, Olympic Movement Code. We made it very clear. We have something called the Conditions of Participation document. Everybody has to sign it, very clear. Manipulation of competitions is mentioned. Then we go about to do a risk assessment on all the sports, and we meet in a pre-Pyeongchang assessment, pre-Olympic Games assessment, one-on-one with the International Federation. We tell them what we expect of the market and what are the major risks in certain of your disciplines. In Pyeongchang, and this is now different from what happened at the Youth Olympic Games, because Youth Olympic Games are not about winning. The Olympics should not be not about winning also, but sometimes they are. Youth Olympic Games are not about winning. So we talk to kids. We have the chance to really touch them and to really make a difference. In Pyeongchang, this is different. We take a step back and we are present there in the IOC space, in the common areas, and we talk about the issues, but I cannot tell you that we will talk to Michael Phelps and make a difference in his mind because he's focused on winning, right? Monitoring, and this is where you guys come in again. We do a 24/7 monitoring, and this with the much appreciated approach by GLMS, by the World Lotteries. Last slide actually will be on that. So, to sum it all up, we all know now, and you knew before, I hope, because you should be knowing that, the lotteries are very, very, very strong partner of the Olympic movement. In each country, in each national lottery, it's different, but it tends to be very, very important, contributing to what the NOC is doing on a national level. Since Rio 2016 and Pyeongchang, we have the support of the lotteries through personnel at the site to reach a 24/7 monitoring. And this is also planned for the next Olympics. So we are already talking about Tokyo. Will be interesting how it can be organized, but it will be organized if it's in Tokyo or if it's in Lausanne, or if we make it remotely. That remains to be seen. But the main idea is that the IOC and the unit has a very, very strong partner and is very thankful for that if it comes to lotteries, specifically for GLMS. And maybe you can help me then, because I think at 2:30 we have a parallel session. Maybe you can look at the program. And I would urge you to really come into the room and listen to what GLMS is doing on the lottery side, because in essence, for us and for me, that means the information that something is happening in some betting market, and the lottery knows, because you guys know what's happening on a national level, that has to be fed through GLMS, and they feed it to the Olympic Movement Unit. So thanks for listening to me. I hope it wasn't too institutional. And I think it says we have 5 minutes left for questions, and let's just see if there are any in the room.
And you hear me? Okay, that's right. If you have any question, please, we have small minutes. Yes, you have? Please raise your hands. Volunteers in red t-shirts are over there. Do you have any question? Do you? Do you? I can hear. Okay. No questions for today? Well, I have one question, Mr. Martin.
Sure.
As you perhaps know, we are passionate about football. When it comes to football, we are very passionate here in Argentina. We have a grand finale next Saturday.
Boca against the River, no?
Yes, Boca will win. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, Boca. So, but we are actually having a really bad trouble with kids. Mm-hmm. Little kids, little ones that play football. They're not really enjoying playing because they feel pressed by their parents to enter to a bigger club or to go to Europe to play or to be an athlete in the next Olympic Games. So they're not enjoying. What would you say to them? And do you think there is a relationship between this and the future manipulation of sports in these little guys?
Of the future, sorry?
If you think there is a relationship between this, the violent conduct of them, and the future manipulation?
Yeah, sure. I cannot comment on the specific Argentinian situation, but no. I for myself, come from a country, we used to be a world champion, I think, in the final against Argentina.
I know.
2018. And it's the same problem. If you talk about football, if you talk about tennis, and that's very interesting to see, because I mentioned sports where the money is big, right?
Yeah.
So you have, of course, sometimes parents who push and push and push their kids. And then you talked about violent conduct, and this is often not being done by the kids themselves or the players themselves. In Germany, at least, sometimes you have coaches storming the field and talking to the referee or abusing the referee. And this is, and I could go back to the first slide, one of my first slides of the presentation, not at all connected to the Olympic values. Yes. I know that the Olympic values, that is something that is probably seen as overdated, historical, but I think it's the essence for at least 30 of those 35 sports. Mm-hmm. And the sole reason is, and this is a bit the answer to your question, these sports are not money-driven. We see in money-driven sports that these problems are cascaded down from the international body down to the national federation, to the clubs on the field, and then also to the youth on the field. So, as you know, this is not the topic that I should even think about having a kind of solution, because that's not my topic. But if I would have kids who would ask me right now what sport to do, I would tell them, go climbing, go speed skating, if possible. In Argentina, it's a bit bit hard. Do archery, do sports like that, and excel in your other life, not connected to sport, in your private life. But if we talk about sport, don't even aim to become the next Messi, because the chances are 0.1%,
Yes.
if at all that.
Thank you, Mr. Friedrich.